Hello and welcome to Cloth Cut Broadcast, to one of the first and hopefully not the last show with me, Ike The Mic. On this first episode we go to Middleton Railway to interview Ian Smith, Vice President, as he talks us through the history of this museum. Hello and welcome to Middleton Railway, and I'm here with Ian Smith and I myself am Ike The Mic. So I would like to ask first off, Ian, we are here in Middleton Railway. Could you tell me what Middleton Railway is and a bit about the history and how it became how we know it today?
Well, how long have you got? Right, the Middleton Railway was started in 1758. We are the world's oldest railway.
Wow.
We say that we're the world's oldest continuously operating railway for a couple of reasons. The first and most obvious one is we've been running trains here every single year since 1758.
Wow.
And the second reason is that whilst there are older railways around, they don't have a piece of paper. This railway, when they first started building it, it actually started in 1755 at the top of the hill in Middleton, and they built the line to Thwaite Gate, which was fine, good idea, except that wasn't where they wanted the coal from the coal mines to go. They wanted the coal from the coal mines to go to the River Aire where Leeds Bridge is now. That meant the railway had to sort of go through 180 degrees and go down the other side of the hill. To do that, they needed to come across common land, and for that they needed an Act of Parliament. The Act of Parliament was very important. The locals, being Yorkshire, they weren't too keen having a railway going across their land, and so the colliery owner, a guy called Charles Brandling, decided to bribe them by saying, right, we will give you coal at a cheaper rate than anybody else. And being Yorkshire, they said, that's fine, but we want it in writing. So they went to Parliament, they got the Act of Parliament, and that Act of Parliament gave us the right to build the railway, and that's why we say we're the world's oldest railway. There is a railway called the Tanfield Railway, built in 1727, much earlier than this, but they don't have the piece of paper.
And I imagine you still got a piece of paper lying around somewhere.
Yeah, it's actually in the archives in Parliament still there. The Act was actually rescinded a few years ago, but the original Act of Parliament still exists, and we have copies of it.
That's amazing. And so I imagine this wasn't for passengers, this would be like for freight, would I?
This was entirely a freight line.
Okay.
Never carried passengers in its life. It was always a cavalry line. In the 1920s, it was used, there were a couple of branch lines put in, and it was taking scrap from Robinson and Birdsall's. Big firm called Clayton Son and Company, they were boiler makers. We took scrap from them and various components went in and out. 1958 was the big year, because in 1958 the colliery there said they wanted to stop sending coal down the entire Middleton Railway to the coal staves, and they were going to shut part of it. The big hoo-ha, the southern end of the line was reconnected to British Rail, halfway up what is the current line. The rest of it, the northern half where you are now, that was closed. Local people didn't like that idea. The local university students, some of whom were tram enthusiasts, they wanted somewhere to put trams because Leeds had finished running its trams, and so they chose the Middleton Railway. And in 1960 we started acquiring trams from various sources. We acquired a diesel engine, which is still here on this site, and we ran for 1 week free rides using a double-deck coach which had come all the way from Swansea, and we ran up and down and carried 7,000 people in a week.
Wow.
And that was the first standard gauge preserved railway in the country.
So to explain to those who may not be familiar with the jargon here, could you explain what gauge is?
Gauge is standard gauge, it's the width between the wheels. Okay? So if you look on any tram track or any railway track, there's two lines. If you see just up here where the engine is,
Yeah.
space between the wheels, that's called gauge. And one amusing fact about the gauge is that it was actually determined by the width of a horse's backside.
Oh.
Because, I can show you on the, I know you want me to sit on radio, but you can see there the pieces of, two pieces of rail on stone blocks. They were called sleepers.
Okay.
The horse would walk in between. So obviously the rails had to be wide enough to allow the horse to walk in between. And your average horse is about 5 foot wide at his back end. So that's the gauge of a railway.
And that, I assume, is before they had like locomotives.
Before they had
engines.
locomotives, it was horses.
Oh, wow.
The first steam engines in 1804, and then here in 1812 we built the first commercially successful steam engines. Long before a certain gentleman called George Stephenson, of which we are very proud.
And is that this one here, the cogwheel?
That's a cogwheel.
Okay.
This is a replica of the rack wheel, the cogwheel, which would be carried on the side, as you can see there. And it was only on one side. The guy who designed it, John Blenkinsop, he knew that just putting a rack wheel on one side wasn't the best way of doing it, but they didn't have any other technology at the time. They did that. The engines worked successfully for 30 years. So when you think in 1812, that was quite something. Now, what you can just see on the picture, there's two cylinders there.
So to just bring a bit of context to the few, listeners that are listening in, basically what we're looking at is what looks like almost like a brewery kit. So it looks like a barrel.
It's a barrel on wheels.
With cogs for the wheels.
Yep. Now, the idea is that there are two big cylinders in the top of that barrel.
Okay.
And what they're doing, they're going up and down separately in opposition to each other. They're called opposed cylinders. This was the first engine to do that, and that was quite important. Those people who might know traction engines, they've got that big wheel on the side, most traction engines, because they're single cylinder. And every so often you'd have to move that wheel to make the engine move. With this system, you put steam into one cylinder, push it down, and when it got to the bottom, steam in the next cylinder to push that down, which would put the other one up, and they were opposed to each other. The first time it was ever used. And every single steam engine since 1812 has had that principle.
Wow.
Which is quite something. These engines worked, I say, for about 25, 30 years. And we're talking rack in 1812. People think of rack railways as those climbing mountains, the famous Snowdon Mountain Railway. And anyway, that's what they adapted it for. What we have in this exhibition that we're studying is this engine here, BAM 402, which is a coal mines one. If you look carefully, you see that the rack rail is in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
The cogwheels and everything's in the middle on this, which is where it should be. Because by the time these had been built in the 1980s, the technology was much, much better. And this worked down a mine, pulling things up from right down below, up onto the surface.
And is this the exact spot it would go down into?
No. This has been put here specially. It came from the National Coal Mining Museum down at Cap House, and we put it in a position specially to show where the rack rail is and how the sort of angle that it would actually work at.
Wow.
Built by the Hunter Engine Company, just down the road.
Wow.
It's quite something, isn't it?
Yeah. Big piece.
Oh, it is, yeah.
And I can see here as well, you've got a picture here that says Salamanca, and it says about creator of Tintin. So could you explain a bit more about its relation to why Tintin is involved in this?
That is the $60,000 question. We assume that Hergé was a railway enthusiast, because if you look around the place, you'll see we've got one or two pictures of one of rocket somewhere and one of locomotion. And he's drawn these pictures quite accurately, but he puts Tintin and Snowy the dog in. So we assume he was a railway enthusiast, and he's drawn several of these.
Wow.
That's really the kind. He likes trains. Maybe he was a first train spotter. You never know.
Maybe. I mean, that would be a very interesting thing to find out more information.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, as well, is there anything you feel as well is something of a highlight that's like your favourite showpiece to go and explain about and stuff?
Well, it depends on what you are. To the railway enthusiast, every single engine in here would be really interesting. We cater for the enthusiast, obviously, but there are all sorts of different things. This that we're looking at here, there's our miner. This was called a pony. Okay. It's got road wheels, not rails, and these were sent down the coal mines to replace pit ponies. And the story of this is actually quite interesting. These ran all over the country for the coal board. The same basic design, slightly modified, was then used on the Royal Navy's aircraft carriers. HMS Ark Royal, the original one, had these. Wow. Bigger ones then went to BOAC at London Airport. And those vehicles were really good. Worked for years. And then they were all scrapped, except one, which went to Hollywood. And it went to Hollywood, and it became the basis of the very first Batmobile film. First Batman film, it became the Batmobile.
Wow.
Well, that's a fun thing. When you look at what we've got here,
yes,
we've got an engine called Henry de Lacy. And that engine epitomises Leeds. This is the story of Leeds in one railway engine. Because Henry de Lacy, with an I, not a Y, he was French, Norman Knight.
Okay.
And you'd have these Norman Knight, he liked nothing better than a bit of, raping and pillaging as they did. But they had to have a line to God. That was part of their religion, And what happened with de Lacy, he was the 4th Baron of Pontefract. He found a band of wandering Cistercian monks in the area, so he gave them a pot of money. And with that money, they founded Kirkstall Abbey. The monks of Kirkstall Abbey founded Kirkstall Forge. And those two things were the basic foundations of the City of Leeds. That's where City of Leeds came from, the Abbey and the Forge. So in one engine, built in 1917, you've got the history of Leeds, if you know how to tell it.
It's amazing how this engine then links history.
It links history.
Leeds literally on the map to be how we know it today.
It's also, I guess, it must be unique. It was built in Leeds, it worked in Leeds, and it's never left the city. Over 100 years old, it's never left the city it was built in. That's quite rare. In fact, I can't think of another one off the top of my head that stayed in the same city.
And what?
Worked at Kirkstall Forge all its life.
Kirkstall Forge?
Yeah, worked at Kirkstall Forge, which is that in the picture there.
Yeah.
It's as founded by the monks. And it came to us in 1968. Wow. Now, we've got a film star here. We've got just up here.
Is it you?
No.
Oh.
It's here. If you look at this engine, MSC, Manchester Ship Canal, 67, in grey.
Yeah.
The Ship Canal built quite a lot of these, or had quite a lot of these built, by Oswald Clark, which was down the road, and this was what was called the long tank, because the tank is long.
Yeah.
They have some shorter ones.
So that's what it says on the tin?
Yeah, that's what it says on the tin. Now, railway children film.
Oh yeah.
We've all seen the railway children film.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the film, there's that famous scene. She comes down from the house, comes down onto the platform, and in comes the engine. There's all the steam, and as the steam clears, there's Daddy, my daddy. This brought Daddy home. This is the engine in the film that brought Daddy home from prison. So it's a film star. And kids love that. They love that story. If you want something else that we show people, just up here, we ask kids a lot. We ask kids this question a lot. Well, how many people have got bicycles? Lots of people have got bicycles. Yeah, and we say, look at the chain under there. If you see, it's got a chain to each axle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing because they see a chain that big, and then the one up there's got even bigger. Kids think, wow. You know, it's a lot bigger than that bicycle chain.
The context of the podcast and the people listening in is that we can see like a bike chain, but like bigger than a bike chain, and it's got like a cogwheel, like what you can use to change gears on a bike. Yeah. And that's like situated in the middle of this locomotive.
That's right. Now this, quite an interesting issue. They've only ever cut 2 of these built, and this went to a brewery. Courage's Brewery at Alton, and it's only 22 horsepower, tiny little thing, and so it's known as Sweet Pea. For those who don't know, Sweet Pea is Popeye's baby in Popeye the Sailor Man, and so it's called Sweet Pea on the grounds that it might run better on spinach. And this is Sweet Pea, lovely little thing. No cab, so it's a bit chilly when you're driving it.
Oh, I can imagine it not very, there's no windows.
No windows, no nothing. Yeah. So you needed to be tough to drive in them days. This one?
Just before you go to that, did this have to travel very far then? Because obviously...
No, this was a yard shunter. It chugged around, moving 3 or 4 wagons about, which is all it was ever designed to do at 22 horsepower. And that's what we used to use it for. We still do occasionally, it still comes out occasionally.
Oh right, okay. Well, that's good. And it's nice to hear that it's still in working condition.
Oh yeah, 1935 that was built, still working.
Wow.
Even older is this one, 1932. Hunter Engine Company. This is the diesel that started work on the Preserve Railway in 1960. Got it from Hunter Engine Company, they used it as a work shunter. You'll see it's got letters on the side, LMS, London, Midland and Scottish Railway. This was a prototype for probably thousands of diesel locomotives built throughout the country. They built a couple before this, but this was built specially for an exhibition in the 1930s. The idea was that the managing director of the Hunter Engine Company at the time, he'd seen diesels, he knew what they were doing in America and in Europe, and he said to his son, right, this could be a good idea, you build a diesel, if it is successful, we will switch to building diesels. If it isn't successful, we'll carry on building steam. So he took the chassis of the steam engine, which is the bottom half, that's a standard steam loco chassis, put a gearbox in, built by David Brown from Huddersfield, a German engine in, and the superstructure, and he created the prototype for literally thousands of diesel shunters. It works very well.
So this is like an engine that revolutionised the rail industry?
Yeah, very much so. Shunting a steam engine, you need 2 people at least. At least 2. Yeah.
Okay.
Plus all the ancillary people to maintain it and whatever. This you can run with 1 person. It was all cost. People think that diesels displaced steam because of air pollution, but it didn't. It was all cost. For this, this thing, 1 person, 8-hour shift, a steam engine would be at least 2, plus a shunter, plus all the maintenance people and all the coal and that it used. The costs were incredible, much more economical.
Because again, I think people will be thinking what you mean and stuff. So, could you just explain what shunting means? Does that mean that...
That means moving wagons from one track to another, making up a train.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like you'd have wagons in a yard, you'd load them up, you'd do the same with a railway wagon, but then you need a diesel engine or a steam engine to come along, pick the wagon up and put it into a train. So that's known as shunting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, the contrast is the one over on the other side. This, much more modern looking, but they're both the same age, 1932. Hunslet Engine Company on one side of Jack Lane, Hudswell Clark on the other.
Okay.
This one's got a steam engine chimney, it's got a steam engine throttle, because Hudswell's thought that the old guys who were driving these steam shunting engines might take to a diesel a little bit better if it looked a bit more like a steam engine. And that was their design philosophy. But they're very, very similar, same sort of jobs, but this is slightly prettier.
Yeah, so it's got a really nice like red colour,
Yep.
kind of like border of like being black and a thin yellow.
Yep.
Like,
The livery, this is Middleton Railway. The Middleton Railway, they had maroon livery, and this yellow and black. Wow. Yeah. And it's quite pristine, isn't it? Looks lovely.
Yeah, it's got a lovely colouring.
Yeah. This is quite pretty. This is Victorian engine. North Eastern Railway, NER.
Okay.
The cylinders on this are inside. So the two round cylinders are actually inside between the frames, between the rails. So you've just got a set of wheels and rods on the side. You see the rods going round? Yeah. 1891 this was built. It's still going strong.
And it's all working.
It did work until last year. It's been taken out of service now. And basically it'll stay as a static engine until we get around to rebuilding it.
Okay.
Which we will do.
Just again, just to let people sort of understand what you mean. So, NER.
North Eastern Railway. That's the North Eastern Railway Company.
So would that be the equivalent of today's LNER?
The North Eastern Railway was one of the constituents of the original London North Eastern Railway. Yes.
Ah,
Yeah.
I see.
That's right. The
Before
current
they
LNER is
all got together.
yeah, they were all put together.
Right. Okay.
Then the LNER wanted a slightly different type of shunting engine, and they got one of these. Well, they got several of these. This is quite different to anything else you'll see. It looks like a box.
Oh, sorry.
It looks like a box. Have you heard of steam wagons? Steam lorries?
You ring the bell, yes.
Yeah, well, steam lorries that works on the roads. This is basically a road steam lorry put onto rails. And what you have is a vertical boiler here, water tube boiler,
Okay.
a proper engine with gears on the other side, and if you look there, you see it's got much, much bigger chains.
Oh,
So you get the chain, one there, and one to the other axle as well. About 100 horsepower one of these. You can raise steam from nothing to 275 pounds per square inch, which is several bar in modern parlance, in about 45 minutes if you know how. If you know what you're doing, you get steam in very, very quick time on one of these. They're not very good for long distances, they're only meant for short shunting jobs, but they were very good at it.
So in and around the shed.
Around the shed, yeah. This worked at what was called a permanent weighing yard up in Darlington, Geneva Permanent Weighing Yard. It was shunting wagons about full of sleepers and rails and things like that. And then it was brought to us on what we call the low mat, so that they could transport it long distances, then they craned it off, and then we got it in 1961. It's been with us ever since. So yeah, we've got quite a good collection of railway engines here. This is the whole building is what we call the engine house, completed 2006.
Okay. This is a brake car, is it?
This is called a brake van.
A brake van. Right.
Yeah, North Eastern it's the abbreviation for the London and North Eastern Railway. It's one of their brake vans. It's a southern area, which meant it was a bit further down south.
Okay.
But this came from a local yard where we've rebuilt it, and what it's doing here, this is going to be Mrs. Santa's little helper's grotto, if you like. This goes on the back of the train, and all the presents for Santa go inside there. And we have one of our volunteers is in there, And as the train is going up, he supplies the presents for Santa to give to the children. That's the idea behind it.
That's an amazing idea.
Yeah.
And what a way to showcase such an extraordinary piece of history.
That's right. We use it on freight trains occasionally. We do what we call demonstration freight trains, and we put some wagons in front of it and the steam engine run up and down with them. But its major thing for us now is as this Santa storeroom where all these presents are. Santa, we'll have a look at the grotto in a minute, but Santa will ride up on one coach and come down on the other. We have boxes, one for boys, one for girls. We fill them up from here. The elves come along with them, take them onto the train, and Santa gives the presents out.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
And just for that, for context reasons, what would brake van purpose be for? Would it be like how would it be used and why did it come about? Why is it not just that steam locomotive just sort of go on its own steam, so to speak, and be able to come to a full stop at a train station without the use of a brake van?
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Oh, it does. Simple thing is, if you don't have one of these, they'll kill people.
Oh, okay.
Right. Right. You have to remember that the early railways, and in fact right up until the end of steam, a lot of wagons didn't have any brakes at all that you could operate. They had handbrakes, but it's no use having a handbrake if you're doing 40 miles an hour.
Yeah, no.
You can't run fast enough. So you'd have a trainload of these wagons. You needed a means of stopping them. And the grain van down there is much heavier. That one has concrete underneath. It's over 20 tons. There's one big brake. And the idea is you have a guard. He's at one end of the train. The driver of the engine at the far end. And the whole train is going along. Sometimes they may what they call pin brakes down. Put the handbrake down so that the brake blocks are just touching the wheels, just to give a little bit of friction. And if you're going down steep hills, they would actually stop the train and pin these brakes down. Otherwise, it's up to the guard and the skill of the guard on his brake
to turn the wheel
at the right time to stop the train running away. If you didn't have any brakes at all, then the weight of the train could overcome the weight of the engine and you crash.
Wow.
And it's happened. There was a famous time when a driver called John Atson was on a train near Buxton, coming down the hill. He had a steam brake, which most steam engines have. That failed, and the train just ran away. And he stayed on that engine all the way, and he was killed as a guy trying to save people. But yeah, if you have too much weight behind the engine, you can crash. So that's why you have a brake van. Now this was slightly different. It was a ballast brake, so it would have had ploughs at each end. You would put your ballast, these are the white stones in between the tracks, yeah? Your wagons would come along, they would drop the ballast, and it would be in a sort of pile in the middle, and what this would do, it would spread the ballast or right across, and then something else would come along and do what was called tamping, get that stone, push it underneath the sleepers to make the track level. And that's what this was used for. It was used as a mess van. Inside there were nice stove to keep you warm, and the other people, track workers, could come in every now and then, warm themselves, that sort of thing, and you needed it.
Yeah, so
you've
already explained it, but how would they communicate with one another? So how would the engine drivers...
Whistles. The guard has a whistle. You've seen a guard with whistles.
Okay.
The engine's got a whistle. There would be a series of whistles that the guard and the driver would exchange.
Okay.
A whole number of code whistles, quite complicated, and the guard would be listening to hear what that driver would do. You know, it could go like a peep peep, or it could do what was called a crow, which is a longer whistle, and whatever whistle he heard, he would then put his brake on, take his brake off, whatever. Yeah, it's quite complicated, but you think these days everybody picks up a mobile phone and just email. In those days, you didn't have anything like that. It's all done with whistles and hand signals. You'd have hand signals. You could put your hands up like that would mean stop.
Yeah.
You could put your hand out to the side, wave it up and down, which is slow down, and so on. Come toward, go away, come towards, all sorts of different signals. You had to learn them as a guard, you had to learn them as a driver.
So kind of like what we would only see now probably in airports of what...
well, yeah, a bit like you see them with a bat, when they're marshalling the aircraft. It's exactly the same principle, and some of the signals are almost the same. But here, on a heritage railway like this, in fact on the big railway for that matter, but certainly here, all our drivers need to know and understand those signals. You've got hand signals, you've also got lights. A lamp, red, green, white, and different aspects will be put on for the night. So you would know, if you're in the dark, see what colour the lamp was, you would obey whatever that lamp colour said. So yeah, there's a whole range of these signals being given and learned and given to each other. Communication, that was always the key. There's a famous saying in the railway world, which I've learned as a guard here, and when I used to be a driver, is you come to a clear understanding of what you are doing, which means that you talk to your driver, you talk to your guard, both of you understand what you're going to do. And if you've got a shunter on the ground, he's included, everybody needs to know what everybody's doing. Because obviously, these things, they're heavy. These things can kill. And so you've got to be on top of your game.
So it's like an orchestra and the signals of like the whistles and all sorts like that.
You could say that, yeah.
It's like the conductors sort of making sure everything's working in a nice harmonised way. Yeah,
you could say that, yeah. You've got to know who's in charge, and basically you've got to obey the instructions. Because if you don't obey the instructions, people can get hurt. It's not a model railway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, these are like proper big.
These are proper big, That, about 10, 15 tonne, 20 odd tonne there. And we've got an engine that's 30 odd tonne, so we might get down the bottom there. So, you don't want that in your tow, thank you very much. Yeah. How's that?
That's amazing, thank you.
You want any more?
Just before I think we should try and wrap this up now. So, one of the questions I thought just as a little fun sort of like question. One thing which is, there's probably about two questions, sorry. So the first question would be, is there locomotives that you are a fan of that's on the railway today? Any modern like locomotives that's on the railway today that you're like, oh, this is the train that I admire the most of modern trains? The second question would be, oh my god, I had it in my head and then it just gone now.
It's alright. Do the first one first, man.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Go on then.
Sorry?
You're going to ask that, or have you just asked it?
Yeah, sorry, I just asked you the first question.
Okay, right.
And now I'll ask you the second one.
A modern railway engine. That's a good question, because the modern locomotives, in inverted commas, are getting to be 40, 50 years old themselves, even on the big railway. So probably because of its utility and the different things it's done, will be the English Electric Class 37s, which are 1,750 horsepower. They were built from 1960 onwards as a medium, what they call medium mixed traffic loco. They're still going strong today, still quite a few around. A lot of heritage railways have them, and they're so useful for doing a whole range of jobs. They can pull passenger trains, freight trains, works trains, you name it, they can do it. And our friends up at the Worth Valley have got one which they're using for their Santa trains. They've got a steam engine on one end and this Class 37 on the other. And they're a very useful engine. If you see what we call a railhead treatment trains running around the country today for the Leeds Street, quite a few of them are hauled by Class 37s. Still, after all these years.
my second question would be, so because you study, you know about the history of trains and stuff, is there something you feel would be really useful for modern day trains that we could learn from the past about and maybe still utilise some of the old ways of working?
Well, if anybody has travelled on a modern train, they will usually say the same thing. Let's bring back some decent seats. Train travel has changed dramatically over the years.
Soundman agreeing very approvingly there.
If you,
Yeah, the soundman was doing yes.
if you look at the difference between today's passenger trains and yesterday's, you've got a preserved railway on what we call a TSO, trailer standard open, which is what they mainly have on the railways, what we call a Mark 1. The seats are in blocks of 4, they're really comfortable seats, and you've got a window to look out of. Go on today's trains, and you're sat on something like an ironing board, and you've just got a wall next to you. You know, the window, they don't line up with the windows. Train travel is nowhere near as pleasant as it once was, because their idea is to cram everybody in, a bit like on an aeroplane, and it's not particularly pleasant. So to me, I want to bring seating back.
I think there's quite a lot of people that are listening and the people here today with us that wholeheartedly agree with what you just said there. And, you know, even I remember, and I'm not even that old, I'm 30, and I remember growing up in the 90s and the class, the old class trains, the locomotives, the slant door shut carriage.
Yeah.
They had like padding, like actual padding.
Yes.
And that was standard class. That wasn't even in the first class accommodation.
Oh, much better.
And it was so much more comfy, and you ride over the bumps a bit. And whilst it was bouncy, it was a lot comfier to handle.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to say thank you for having
No problem.
for doing this interview today, and taking the time out of your hard timetable. Thank you very much to Ian Smith for that insightful and enjoyable interview on this museum. Join me on the next podcast where I'll be focused on more transport in West Yorkshire by interviewing Councillor Neil Buckley and his role in the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.